Hello there, I'm Simon Rafe and welcome to Brown Bag Bible Study, the Bible study you can do in your lunch break. Now this is an introduction to Scripture, which will give you some information that you might not have known and encourage you to read the Bible, but most importantly, it's presented in little bite-sized pieces which are perfect to fit in with our busy lifestyles. Now every week I'll be concentrating on a small part of Scripture, either one of the 73 books of the Bible or a group of related books, and I'll be bringing you some interesting facts and information to help you better understand it. I'll also be including some links to further reading, articles, books and so forth, which will help you learn to love sacred Scripture even more. This week, an overview of what are commonly known as the historical books. Now, these books are not always known by this name, and they are not always gathered together or viewed as a set of books in the Bible. In fact, even in this Bible study, we aren't going to be dealing with all of them together. But it can be helpful to look at these books as a group in order to understand how they differ from the rest of the Bible. The historical books are part of the Old Testament, the scriptures the church received from the Jews before the incarnation, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. As the name implies, they describe historical events which impacted the Jewish people. Of course, the vast majority of the books of the Bible describe historical events, so how are these books any different? Well, these books are almost exclusively history, while other books use the historical narratives to frame important spiritual truths. Now, this isn't to say these historical books don't have spiritual lessons to impart, far from it, but rather that their main focus is the retelling of history, usually for a particular purpose. Now, when we read the historical books, we need to remember a number of very important things. Firstly, history, as a history professor of mine once said, is simply a set of stories we tell about what has happened. The goal of the ideal historian is to tell the absolute, perfect, objective truth, but that's not always possible. Sometimes we don't have all the facts, and so the historian has to take a guess. In some cases, people are writing history coloured by their own views and prejudices, sometimes consciously and sometimes unconsciously. People write based on what they believe and what they have been told, and this can change how we might tell a story. Finally, some history is written for a particular purpose, to educate people about a particular aspect of the past. Histories like this are sometimes incomplete. A military history might not mention social or economic history, for example, and sometimes might even exaggerate or minimise aspects of what happened. All of this is important to know when we read the historical books in the Bible, as they are what we, with our modern understanding and ideas of history, might call historical errors in there. It is very important to remember that the purpose of the Bible is not to give us a perfectly accurate, completely objective retelling of history, but rather to provide us with sacred scripture, words which contain the profound spiritual truths about the world. Now, it's also the case the Bible is not unique in this regard. The vast majority of historical texts from the biblical period diverge from the objective, perfect historical truth because they are written for a particular purpose by fallible historians who are ignorant of some facts or prejudiced by their environment. Now, this was the standard practice for the time, and so we must be careful we do not judge the Bible by modern standards. If we do, we will completely miss the point. Having said all that, the historical books of the Bible are, as surprising as it might seem to arch-secularists hell-bent on destroying Christianity, very historically accurate indeed. Archaeology continues to reveal new findings which support the historical record in the Bible, and the books of the Bible are considered by many historians to be the best historical record we have of this period in the history of the Middle East. Now that's all for this time. If you want to get a head start on reading the historical books, be my guest, but there are plenty of resources recommended in the additional reading. Next week, I'll be looking at a particular grouping of books in the historical books section, the Deuteronomic history. Until then, I'm Simon Rafe, and God bless. To learn more about the place of Scripture in the lives of Catholic Christians, I urge you to read Pope Benedict's apostolic exhortation Verbum Domini. The Pope encourages all Catholics to read, learn and love Scripture and to understand its relation to the Church. A link to this exhortation is included in the reading materials for every episode of Brown Bag Bible Study. Just click the link over there.